Hey guys, tonight we ease into a Russia that feels like it's holding its breath. Streets dusted with frost, chimneys coughing out thin smoke, and you walking along wooden sidewalks that creak just enough to remind you that nothing here is built to last. You pass peasants wrapped in patched coats, factory workers already tired before sunrise, and nobles who pretend everything's fine as long as their horses are brushed and their tea is hot. Deep down, you sense a quiet pressure building, like a boiler with a cracked valve. And honestly, if you were dropped into this moment for real, yeah, you probably wouldn't survive this week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along muddy roads that stretch through endless Russian countryside, and you can almost hear the soil groaning under centuries of semi-feudal weight. Peasants, still tied to outdated farming tools, push plows through fields that seem to give less each year. You step into one of their cottages and smell boiled buckwheat, wet wool, and a life with no margin for error. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. By 1900, over 80% of Russia's population were peasants, many living in conditions not far removed from medieval serfdom. They carried generational exhaustion, the kind that leaves shoulders hunched, even at rest. But shift your boots toward the cities, and the pace changes. You move through factory districts lit by smokestacks and loud with grinding gears. Industrial workers crammed into barracks-like apartments labor 12 or 14 hours a day. Their lunch breaks smell like stale bread and metal filings. Some joke that the machines get better treatment than they do. One quirky tidbit that actually circulated at the time: workers often swore their factory whistles were possessed, since the shrill tones varied with temperature, like industrial ghosts screaming about working conditions. Historians still argue whether this was genuine superstition or just exhausted humor. But either way, you can feel the bleak comedy of it seep into your bones. And then there's the Russian elite. You wander into a grand ballroom where chandeliers glitter like ice crystals, violins whisper waltzes, and the aristocracy pretends they're living in a French novel. They discuss political reform with the same energy they discuss new pastries. Yet you catch hints of fear, whispers about disorder in St. Petersburg, talk of rising prices, and the nagging realization that the 1905 revolution had rattled their gilded world far more than they let on. After that revolt, Tsar Nicholas II reluctantly created the Duma, Russia's first national assembly, but he spent the next decade clawing back its power like a cat, flattening every piece of parchment that dared to limit him. When you look at Nicholas II, you see a man who wants to be a symbol more than a ruler. A man in a spotless military uniform who believes he can will Russia into obedience simply by appearing calm. But you also sense something brittle behind his eyes. You imagine him poring over reports of food shortages while trying not to spill tea on documents warning him that the empire is sliding into crisis. A modern aside, he's the kind of guy who'd scroll past financial warnings like you scroll past "Are you sure you want to leave this site?" pop-ups. Then, World War I crashes through the door like a drunken guest who refuses to leave. You feel the front line stretch from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and you can almost hear the clatter of rifles and the endless rumble of artillery. Russia mobilizes millions, but the logistics, oh boy. Imagine trying to run a marathon in flip-flops while juggling bricks and blindfolded, except the marathon track keeps moving. That's Russia's wartime supply system. Soldiers march without proper boots, without rifles, sometimes without ammunition. A mainstream fact: by 1915, Russia was losing entire divisions due to lack of equipment, not enemy fire alone. You catch the scent of wood smoke mixing with cold air as soldiers huddle around makeshift fires, muttering about incompetent officers. Some are convinced the Tsarina's German heritage means she's literally sabotaging the empire from her palace. One fringe rumor even claimed she replaced important officials with secret German agents, which was untrue, but in a collapsing society, truth becomes optional. Back in Petrograd, you push through crowds queuing for bread. People wrap scarves over their mouths, not because of disease, but because the wind feels like it's trying to peel your skin off. The shelves grow emptier each week, the prices climb higher, and public resentment smolders hotter than factory furnaces. You overhear someone muttering that the Tsar is not just out of touch, but out of reality. Historians still argue whether Nicholas truly understood the depth of the crisis or whether his advisors insulated him until it was too late. Fuel shortages turn winter into a slow, grinding threat. You watch families burn furniture for warmth, chairs, old picture frames, even small chests that once held family heirlooms. A grandmother jokes darkly that she hopes the furniture doesn't complain about being drafted into the war effort. You feel the empire sag under its own weight. Every step you take through villages, barracks, factories, and palaces reinforces the sense that Russia is a world divided into parallel universes sharing the same landmass. The contradictions rub together like tectonic plates, and you can almost hear the first low groans of an earthquake that will break everything open. You sense what's coming, even if no one here can fully picture it. The convergence of social grievances, political mismanagement, wartime devastation, and sheer exhaustion. And so you move toward the end of this section with that feeling in your chest, the one that says the ground is about to give way. You're walking through a country where each sunrise feels like a cliffhanger, each rumor feels like a fuse, and every desperate conversation hints that the old world cannot survive much longer. You drift forward into the frozen streets of Petrograd, where the wind feels sharp enough to slice through your coat, and the city creaks under the weight of a winter everyone is tired of surviving. You pass bakery lines that wrap around corners like sleepy serpents, people stamping their feet in rhythm just to stay warm. Their breath hangs in the air like tiny storm clouds, and you sense in their faces the quiet, accumulating anger that spreads when hunger replaces patience. You don't need a newspaper headline to know something is snapping. You feel it with every step, like the pavement is humming beneath your boots. It begins small. It almost always does. Women march out on International Women's Day, a mainstream fact you might already know, protesting shortages, low wages, and a government that feels allergic to reality. But today, the mood is different. You can hear it in the chants, louder than they were last year. You can see it in the way the crowds pull in factory workers like a rising tide pulling at driftwood. Hundreds become thousands, and you find yourself swept into the momentum. Your hands pulled deep into your pockets as bodies sway around you like a restless sea. The police try to push the crowd back, but you can tell their hearts aren't in it. One officer mutters under his breath about his own family barely affording bread. Another looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, maybe even hiding behind a stack of frozen potatoes. Soldiers are eventually called in, tired, cold, starving soldiers, and you watch them line up hesitantly, rifles in hand. They receive orders to fire on the crowd, but their fingers don't move. Historians still argue whether it was ideological sympathy or survival instinct, but the result is the same. The soldiers refuse. Some toss their rifles into the snow. Others join the protests outright. A few shout jokes about whose boots have the most holes, but behind the humor is something irreversible. You walk past the barracks later that night and see soldiers huddled together, arguing in low, urgent tones about whether killing civilians for the Tsar makes any sense when their own families are starving. A quirky tidbit from the time: some soldiers became convinced that if they shot protesters, the ghosts of the hungry would haunt their bunks. It sounds ridiculous now, but when you sleep on straw sacks and listen to artillery in the distance, ghost stories feel a lot more credible. As chaos spreads, you feel it in the air, like static before a storm. Suddenly, Petrograd isn't a functioning city. Trams stop, shops close, factories grind to a halt because no one is willing to obey orders when the streets feel like they're cracking open. Rumors swirl like snowflakes, some true, some nonsense, some dangerous. You overhear whispers that the Tsar is on his way back to restore order. You overhear others saying he's hiding in a train car, unsure of what to do. Knowing Nicholas II's usual reaction speed, you wouldn't be shocked if he's still rereading the same telegram for the 5th time. Eventually, the High Command makes a decision. They pressure Nicholas to abdicate. You feel the moment like a sudden drop in temperature. The man who ruled the empire for decades becomes, in a few signatures, a private citizen. You imagine him staring at the paper afterward, wondering how everything changed so quickly. Some say he cried. Some say he prayed. Some say he simply stood there, numb. Historians still argue whether he fully understood the gravity of what he had just agreed to, or whether he assumed he'd eventually be restored like a misplaced keystone reinserted into a crumbling arch. The empire becomes a republic almost overnight. And you suddenly feel the strange weightlessness of living in a country that lost its ruler, but hasn't yet found its future. Into that vacuum steps the provisional government, mostly moderate liberals who try to project competence while drowning in paperwork and panic. They promise reforms, elections, stability. They speak in calm, soothing tones like doctors who've seen too many patients collapse but are still trying to sound positive. But walk a few blocks, maybe past the factories again or near the barracks, and you encounter a second center of power, the Petrograd Soviet, a radical body of workers and soldiers who don't trust the provisional government any more than they trust a rusty boiler. They speak the language of direct action, not polite speeches. A mainstream fact worth noting, the Soviet issues Order Number 1, which tells soldiers to obey their officers only when those orders do not contradict Soviet directives. You can practically hear the sound of authority shattering like thin ice. You watch junior officers stare at the order like it's some dark joke that no one explained to them. From there, dual power becomes your new normal. You navigate a city divided between government offices trying to appear official and Soviet committees buzzing like revolutionary beehives. Sometimes you see both groups claim to be in control of the same street on the same day. It's a bit like two people arguing over who owns a cat, while the cat walks away and steals someone else's lunch. Even ordinary conversations become part of the revolution. A vendor selling sunflower seeds mutters about soldiers refusing orders. A group of students debate the meaning of democracy while accidentally knocking over a crate of apples. You overhear someone claim the revolution is temporary, that Russia will stabilize in a month. Someone else laughs so hard they nearly choke. A third makes a joke about how the pigeons in Petrograd now expect political pamphlets along with crumbs. Everywhere you go, uncertainty clings to you like snowflakes. Authority feels temporary. Leadership feels optional. The air tastes like possibility, sharp, unpredictable, almost dizzying. You walk with a sense that something bigger is coming, something building just outside your field of vision, ready to swing the next hinge of history open with a force no one can stop. And through it all, February melts into March, and you feel the city's mood shift from relief to impatience. The provisional government promises change, but keeps Russia in the war. People notice. Soviets gain influence. Orders get ignored. Tension builds like a violin string pulled too tight. You know, with a kind of dreamy dread that this isn't the end of the revolution. It's the prologue, the calm breath before a deeper plunge. You slip into the weeks after the Tsar's abdication, where Petrograd feels like a city balancing on mismatched stilts. One leg labeled provisional government, the other labeled Soviet, and both wobbling in opposite directions. You can sense the tension, not through dramatic clashes or thunderous speeches, but through the quiet absurdities of daily life. A streetcar conductor tells you he accepts provisional government authority between sunrise and lunch, but after that, he listens to the Soviet because their meetings have better tea. A joke, sure, but jokes always carry a kernel of discomfort, like a pebble in your shoe that reminds you something here doesn't fit. You wander past the Tauride Palace, where the provisional government huddles behind polished doors and tired optimism. Ministers debate laws that sound elegant on paper, but melt like butter when they try applying them to a country at war, hungry, and politically over-caffeinated. A mainstream historical fact cuts through the chaos. The provisional government insisted Russia must stay in World War I, believing withdrawal would betray the Allies and doom the new republic. You can almost hear the collective groan of factory workers and soldiers when that announcement spreads, like someone promising dessert and handing out sandpaper instead. Take another turn past the city's barracks, and you find conversations that crackle with irritation. Soldiers, newly empowered by the Petrograd Soviet, gather in circles, boots muddy, rifles leaning against walls, breath clouding in the cold air. They argue about orders from officers, from the Soviet, from the government, and sometimes laugh bitterly because all three sets contradict each other. A quirky tidbit: a few units begin keeping two separate notebooks, one labeled official orders and the other orders we might actually follow. Historians still argue whether these notebooks were widespread or just a local joke. But either way, their existence tells you everything about the moment. Meanwhile, the Petrograd Soviet hums like a beehive plugged into a generator. Workers crowd into stuffy rooms where windows rattle and agitation flows like steam from factory valves. They talk not about maintaining the war, but about ending it. Not about patching the old system, but about replacing it entirely. You feel their energy radiate from the walls, urgent, rough-edged, and a little intoxicating. It smells like sweat, ink, and revolution. The Soviets' influence swings outward like a ripple across a lake. Factories elect committees, soldier units form councils, villages start sending delegates who ride trains for days just to squeeze into half-lit meeting halls. And you, slipping through the city, feel like you're watching two governments pretend not to trip over each other while the ground between them cracks wider every hour. At the same time, the economy buckles harder. You watch bakers try to stretch dwindling sacks of flour and mutter that even their dough has given up. You pass warehouses filled with crates that no one can distribute because no one knows which authority signs what paperwork anymore. A rumor spreads that a shipment of boots sat for a week because it needed 5 different stamps, 1 from each power center and 2 from offices that no longer technically exist. No one knows if the story is real, but honestly, in this Russia, it barely matters. The provisional government tries to calm the country by broadcasting messages that sound vaguely reassuring, like temporary difficulties and necessary sacrifices. But you see how people react. Shrugs, eye rolls, laughter so cynical it borders on performance art. The government promises elections. The Soviet demands immediate reforms. The government urges discipline. The Soviet encourages democratic control by workers and soldiers. You feel the tug of war in every conversation, in every street corner debate, in every argument outside a tram stop, where someone inevitably mutters that the whole empire feels like it's being held together with soggy rope. One afternoon, you find yourself standing beside a group of soldiers outside their barracks as they discuss Order Number 1, the Soviet decree that gave them unprecedented autonomy. Some are thrilled, some confused, some uneasy. One officer tries to make a speech about discipline, but halfway through, a private interrupts to ask if the speech is a suggestion or an order. The officer hesitates, and that hesitation hangs in the air like a frostbitten leaf refusing to fall. Historians still argue whether this moment, soldiers asserting control, was the revolution's true turning point or just one step among many. But standing there, you feel history tilting. As spring seeps into Petrograd, melting the snow into gray slush that collects in ankle-deep puddles, the army's mood worsens. Letters from the front speak of pointless attacks, missing supplies, commanders who seem more confused than confident. Soldiers desert in trickles that become streams. Trains returning from the front carry men with hollow eyes and ragged uniforms, muttering that no one knows what they're fighting for anymore. You overhear a soldier joke that if the war continues, they might as well replace their rifles with shovels and dig themselves a collective winter home. The others laugh, not because it's funny, but because the alternative is crying. The front feels far, but its shadow stretches across every conversation. Factories suffer too. Machines break down because there's no replacement metal. Workers sleep at their stations because the commute is too exhausting. A quirky tidbit emerges. Some factories begin organizing sleep shifts, where half the workers nap beside the machines while the other half operate them. Whether it's true or exaggerated, you see the exhaustion everywhere. Amid all this, political parties proliferate like mushrooms after rain. Bolsheviks, Mensheviks, SRs, cadets. You walk past street corners where young activists hand out pamphlets with ink still smudging their fingers. Some hand you copies with fiery slogans. Others whisper about conspiracies and foreign plots. You can tell by the way their eyes move that fear and hope have become indistinguishable twins. The provisional government tries to project unity, but cracks show quickly. Ministers resign. Debates drag on for hours. They issue statements about governing responsibly while relying on the very Soviet that constantly undermines them. It's like watching someone try to stitch a torn coat using spaghetti threads. You navigate markets where vendors price goods by guessing what tomorrow's inflation might bring. You bump into shopkeepers who slap new signs over old ones so many times you can see the layers peeling like tree bark. And you sense deep in your gut that the country is drifting, not steering. People start asking a question no one asked during the Tsar's rule. Who actually runs Russia now? The answer shifts daily, sometimes hourly, depending on which street you stand on and which banner flaps in the wind above you. You begin to understand something subtle but enormous. Revolutions aren't just explosions. They're slow-motion avalanches that start quietly, then suddenly accelerate until the whole mountain is moving and no one, absolutely no one, can stop it. And as spring edges towards summer, you feel the ground sliding faster beneath your feet. Two governments, one country, zero stability. And somewhere far away, a train will soon carry a man returning from exile, someone who intends to turn this unstable moment into something even more transformative. You feel the spring air warm just enough to make Petrograd's streets smell like damp stone and coal dust, and you sense the city bracing itself, like everyone is waiting for someone to show up and flip the table over. Then word spreads that a train is coming. Not just any train, a sealed one. The kind that sounds like the start of a conspiracy theory, except this time, it's true. You follow the current of people heading toward Finland Station, because apparently, curiosity is more powerful than hunger or exhaustion. And when the crowd parts, you see him. Lenin, stepping onto the platform with the energy of someone who drank a whole pot of tea and then remembered he had a revolution to run. He doesn't stroll or wave politely. He moves with that sharp, impatient purpose of someone who thinks everyone else is late. And you feel the city tilt just a little. A mainstream historical fact anchors the moment. Lenin returns in April 1917 after years of exile, and within hours, he announces the April Theses, his bold, borderline shocking plan that calls for all power to the Soviets, an immediate end to the war, land redistribution, and a socialist transformation that makes even some radicals blink twice. You watch people react in real time, some thrilled, some horrified, some muttering that Lenin must have rewritten politics the way you rewrite a grocery list. A quirky tidbit swirls around the station, a rumor that Lenin traveled in a germ-proof steel carriage because no one wanted him infecting Europe with revolution. It's exaggerated, of course, but the sealed train becomes an instant legend, proof that even his arrival feels dramatic enough to deserve its own theme music. You drift through the days that follow, watching Lenin speak to crowds with a focus so intense it's almost uncomfortable. He points his finger a lot. He leans forward like he's trying to pull the future closer. He challenges every assumption the provisional government clings to, and you feel that his words stick in people's minds like burrs. Some leave his speeches looking electrified. Others look like they need a long nap, a cup of tea, and a therapist. The provisional government reacts as if someone threw a smoke bomb into their meeting room. They dismiss Lenin's ideas as unrealistic, dangerous, destabilizing. Pick a synonym for problem, and they use it. But Lenin doesn't care. You sense that he thrives on the tension. He speaks directly to workers who feel betrayed, to soldiers who want to go home, to peasants who wonder why landowners still claim the earth beneath their feet. And bit by bit, his ideas start threading through people's conversations, like a melody everyone slowly hums without realizing it. Meanwhile, the war continues to unravel. Summer approaches, and the military leadership, desperately trying to show that Russia can still function, launches the June offensive. You can practically feel the dread dripping off soldiers as they march toward the front, because no one believes this will go well. And they're right. The offensive collapses spectacularly. Soldiers refuse to advance. Whole units melt away. You hear returning troops mutter that even the mud fought better than the officers. Historians still argue whether the offensive was doomed from the moment it was conceived or simply mismanaged into oblivion. But you don't need to pick a side. You can see the results all around you. Morale craters. Desertions spike. People shake their heads at the provisional government, like parents who just watched their kid run directly into a lamppost. And through this catastrophe, the Bolsheviks gain momentum. They didn't fire the first shot, but they definitely provide commentary afterward. You hear activists handing out leaflets, their fingers stained with ink, arguing that only a new system, not a patched-up liberal government, can fix Russia. Crowds grow restless. Factories buzz with rumors. Soldiers shout political slogans during roll call. Even sailors on the Baltic Fleet start debating revolutionary strategy over dinner, pushing aside bowls of thin soup to draw diagrams of power structures. Then, summer heat smothers Petrograd, and tensions boil over into the July days. You walk into the streets one afternoon, expecting the usual chaos, and instead, you find something sharper. Armed workers and soldiers marching, chanting, demanding that the Soviets seize power immediately. It feels less like a protest and more like a tidal wave wearing boots. You weave through the crowds as they surge toward government buildings, and you sense how fragile the moment is. Some Bolsheviks want to ride the wave. Others, including Lenin himself, hesitate, recognizing that the timing is wrong, that momentum without strategy might crush them instead of the government. But the masses are already moving, and you follow them through streets buzzing with anger, hope, confusion, and the faint metallic smell of gun oil. Shots ring out. People scatter. Chaos folds into panic. By nightfall, the uprising collapses under government force and disorganization. The provisional government blames the Bolsheviks entirely, happy to grab a scapegoat the way you grab a blanket when the room gets cold. Arrests follow. Newspapers smear Lenin as a traitor. Someone claims he's a German agent hiding gold bars under his mattress. You doubt that, mostly because he looks like a man whose idea of luxury is maybe an extra pillow. Lenin flees Petrograd, disguising himself in ways that future textbooks always show too politely. In reality, you suspect his disguises looked less like master of subterfuge and more like guy who borrowed a cousin's coat. But he escapes to Finland, and the Bolsheviks temporarily lose ground. Support dips, leaders hide. Some activists burn documents so quickly you imagine their rooms filling with smoke like a badly ventilated sauna. People whisper that the Bolshevik moment is over, that the movement peaked too early, that Lenin is done. But when you look around, really look, you see the deeper truth. The provisional government hasn't regained people's trust. The war still drains the country like a cracked barrel. Food shortages tighten. Factories stall. The Soviets' influence grows quietly, even as the Bolsheviks stumble. The city doesn't feel calmer. It feels like the air before a thunderstorm, charged, humming, waiting. And somewhere in the distance, you sense another figure rising, a general whose actions will accidentally hand the Bolsheviks their greatest boost yet. You ease into late summer with the kind of uneasy calm that feels more like a held breath than a real pause, as if Petrograd itself is tiptoeing around loose floorboards. The air hangs warm and heavy, carrying the smell of street dust, factory smoke, and the faint tang of the Neva River rolling past, pretending the country isn't at the edge of a cliff. But you can feel it. Changes ripple under the surface. The Bolsheviks are bruised from the July days, the provisional government looks rattled, and the Soviets pretend to play both mediator and menace. It's like watching a three-legged dog trying to win a sprint, brave but doomed to faceplant. The aftermath of the July days hits hard. You walk into a meeting room that once buzzed with Bolshevik confidence and find chairs overturned, papers scattered, ink splattered like dried shadows. Leaders vanish underground. Secret printing presses go quiet. You hear someone mutter that the revolutionaries have evaporated like morning mist, though judging by the panic in their voice, they're hoping the mist doesn't suddenly recondense above their head.
Lenin himself is gone, off to Finland, with a shaved beard, a wig, and the kind of fake identity that would make a modern airport security officer inhale sharply. A quirky tidbit floats around Petrograd. Someone swears they saw Lenin disguised as a forest ranger, lecturing trees about dialectical materialism. Almost definitely nonsense, but given the chaos, you wouldn't put it entirely past him. Historians still argue whether Lenin fled begrudgingly or with cold calculation. But as you watch his supporters shuffle nervously, you sense that his absence hangs over the movement like a badly patched roof. For a moment, just a moment, it truly looks like the Bolsheviks are finished. The provisional government arrests their leaders, seizes their papers, and fills the newspapers with accusations of treason, German funding, and plots grand enough to make conspiracy theorists nod respectfully. Crowds flip from cheering to jeering, because public opinion in 1917 swings faster than a door caught in a storm. Some workers distance themselves. Some soldiers tear up Bolshevik pamphlets with dramatic flair, as if expecting applause. And yet, you notice something subtle. The government may condemn the Bolsheviks, but it hasn't solved a single real problem. Food shortages continue. Inflation tightens like a vice. Factories complain about missing raw materials. Soldiers still desert in droves. The war grinds on. You watch a woman trade her family's only silver spoon for a loaf of black bread, and she shrugs as if this is simply how the universe works now. Meanwhile, the Soviets, especially the Petrograd Soviet, don't break ties with the Bolsheviks entirely. They keep a cautious distance, like someone avoiding a friend who makes questionable choices yet has undeniable charisma. You walk through their crowded hall and hear delegates arguing over strategy, wringing their hands over the July chaos and whispering that perhaps the Bolsheviks went too far, but also that the provisional government is drifting toward the right in a way that feels dangerous. And into this tender, fractured moment steps General Laver Kornilov, a man whose mustache alone could probably lecture a field of recruits. He radiates discipline, severity, and the kind of conviction that makes you instinctively straighten your posture when he walks past. Soldiers admire him. Conservatives adore him. The provisional government, however,
flirts with him the way someone flirts with fire. Hopeful it will keep them warm, terrified it will burn the house down. Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky, worn thin by pressure and sleep deprivation, initially sees Kornilov as a stabilizing force, a strong hand to steady a nation unraveling at the seams. But as Kornilov speaks more boldly about restoring order by any means necessary, you feel a different energy stirring. His supporters whisper openly that the revolution has gone too far, that Petrograd needs a firm cleansing, that discipline must return, even if it means trampling over new freedoms. A mainstream fact anchors this shift. By August 1917, Kornilov begins positioning himself as the man who can save Russia from chaos, and his march toward Petrograd quickly becomes the event that will flip Russia's political alignment once again. You sense it first in rumors, Cossack units mobilizing, supply trains heading north, military commanders receiving strangely vague orders. Then it becomes official. Kornilov sends troops toward Petrograd, claiming he intends to restore order. Kerensky panics. The government panics. The Soviet panics. You, standing in the middle of a street market, watch someone drop a handful of pickles in shock when the news spreads. And then something extraordinary happens. A twist that would feel too dramatic if it weren't real. The provisional government, terrified of Kornilov's march, turns to the very people they were persecuting only weeks earlier. They ask the Bolsheviks for help. You see stunned expressions everywhere. A soldier stops mid-sentence. A factory worker drops a wrench on his foot. Even a carriage horse seems to blink twice. The Bolsheviks, villainized and hunted just days ago, suddenly become necessary allies. Kerensky releases imprisoned Bolsheviks, arms workers, and implores revolutionary organizations to help defend the city. You witness the transformation firsthand. Red Guards train openly in the streets, sweat dripping onto cobblestones. Workers fortify bridges, erect barricades, weld metal plates onto streetcars. And the Bolsheviks, still battered but now galvanized, organize everything with rapid efficiency, as if they'd rehearsed a moment like this in their sleep. A quirky tidbit slips into the mix. Some Petrograd neighborhoods use theater props, fake cannons, painted scenery walls, and even papier-mâché shields to make defenses appear larger. Whether this fooled anyone is up for debate, but you admire the creativity. Historians still argue whether Kornilov intended an outright coup or a misguided attempt to impose military order. But as you watch crowds rally against him, the nuance becomes irrelevant. Kornilov's forces stall. Railway workers divert trains. Telegraph operators sever communication lines. Propaganda spreads faster than military orders. Soldiers refuse to advance. Some even switch sides. Kornilov's march collapses without a major battle, dissolving like sugar in hot tea. And then, like a tide rushing in after a long ebb, the Bolsheviks surge back into prominence. You feel the change instantly. People look at them differently, no longer as reckless agitators, but as the ones who defended the revolution when it mattered. Membership skyrockets. Crowds nod approvingly when activists speak. Factory committees lean left. Garrisons drift into Bolshevik influence like iron filings pulled to a magnet. It's almost surreal. A month earlier, they were fugitives. Now they are heroes. And you, standing amid cheering crowds, realize a truth unfolding in real time. Kornilov tried to crush radicalism, and instead poured gasoline on it. The July days had made the Bolsheviks cautious. The Kornilov affair makes them confident. Quietly, steadily, their strength grows. The city doesn't know it yet, but you sense it. The next major storm is coming, and the Bolsheviks will not be the ones running this time. You step into early autumn with the feeling that Petrograd has finally decided what season it wants. But politically, the city is still a kaleidoscope that won't settle. The nights grow colder, chimney smoke curls through the air, and the streets wear a thin slick of rain that makes every cobblestone shine like wet steel. Yet beneath this quiet, you sense something shifting, something steady and deliberate. The Bolsheviks, recently battered and scattered, are now walking with a new confidence, the kind that makes you wonder if the July days were merely a stumble before a sprint. You wander past a neighborhood meeting hall where workers crowd inside, sleeves rolled up, brows furrowed, voices low but determined. You hear someone say that the Bolsheviks are the only ones who actually warned them about Kornilov. Another complains that the provisional government still demands loyalty without offering bread, peace, or the slightest acknowledgement that the country is collapsing faster than his boot soles. A mainstream historical fact underlines this. After the Kornilov affair, Bolshevik membership explodes, surging past hundreds of thousands by late 1917, as workers, soldiers, and sailors flock to the movement that had defended Petrograd when no one else could. Their confidence shows. Red Guards drill openly in factory courtyards. Factory committees debate not whether to support the Bolsheviks, but how quickly. Soldiers in garrisons murmur about electing Bolshevik-friendly delegates to the Soviets. It's as if the entire city inhaled deeply during the Kornilov crisis and now exhales in the shape of a red banner. Meanwhile, the provisional government looks like a sleep-deprived parent trying to manage children who all want different bedtimes. Kerensky strides around with grand speeches about national unity, but you can see the exhaustion etched into his face. Dark circles, twitchy gestures, a forced smile that looks 2 seconds from collapsing. His government tries to project authority, yet every decision seems to dissolve into thin air the moment it leaves his desk. You pass a newspaper stand where headlines flip from optimism to panic daily, the paper stacks sagging like tired shoulders. Inside the Tauride Palace, debates stretch long into the night, but the ministers seem to argue with the fatalism of people rearranging deck chairs on a ship that is already tilting. Someone jokes that the government should issue ration cards for political crises, since they seem to happen 3 times a week. A quirky tidbit flows through the corridors. A rumor that Kerensky kept a secret suitcase packed just in case. Historians still argue whether this suitcase ever existed or was just a frustrated aide's attempt at humor, but the story sticks because it feels plausible. Step outside those overlit rooms and into the smoky halls of the Petrograd Soviet, and you feel the difference immediately. The Soviet buzzes with purpose. Delegates scribbling notes, messengers rushing in and out, printers whirring like mechanical hearts. It's messy, chaotic, and intense, but alive in a way the provisional government hasn't been for months. And within the Soviet, the Bolsheviks gain the upper hand with astonishing speed. Their slogans settle into people's minds: peace, land, and bread. Simple, direct, irresistible after years of war and hunger. Lenin, still in hiding, smuggles letters into Petrograd like secret messages from a revolutionary Santa Claus. These messages arrive at Bolshevik headquarters, sometimes in pockets, sometimes in shoes, occasionally in loaves of bread, and they ignite debates like sparks. Should they push for immediate uprising? Should they wait for the Congress of Soviets? Should they seize the moment or build broader support? Each letter is delivered with the urgency of a man who senses history breathing down his neck. Trotsky steps forward too, newly released from prison and already commanding meetings with that theatrical mix of intellect and intensity that could persuade even a bored statue. You hear him speak at the Soviet, his voice sharp, precise, unrelenting, and you feel the room lean in as he builds arguments like scaffolding, layer by layer. Workers nod, soldiers clap. Even skeptics, arms crossed, tilt their heads just a little. By late September, the Bolsheviks win majorities in both the Petrograd and Moscow Soviets. You stand outside the meeting hall when the results spill out into the street, and the reaction washes over you like a fresh gust of cold air. This isn't just momentum, this is a turning point. The Bolsheviks now control the institutions that claim to represent the working class and the soldiers. It's a foothold, a real one, in a city where political ground shifts constantly. But even as Bolshevik influence rises, the city creaks under worsening conditions. Bread rations shrink again. Trams break down. Factories operate in fits and starts. At night, you hear long, frustrating, and while everyday hardships grow heavier, Bolshevik strategies sharpen. They establish the Military Revolutionary Committee, which sounds like something pulled from a spy novel, but in practice becomes the coordinating nerve center for the coming struggle. Meetings stretch past midnight. A quirky observational detail emerges. Someone claims the committee's office used to be a dance school, and that occasionally, when the room falls quiet, you can still hear the faint creak of old ballroom floors beneath revolutionary boots. Whether true or not, it's the kind of poetic irony Petrograd specializes in. Historians still argue whether the Bolsheviks planned an uprising from the moment they gained Soviet majorities, or whether events pushed them faster than they anticipated. But as you move through the city, weaving between meetings, rumors, and shifting elite, Kerensky tries to rally support, but the military districts swing red. Newspapers criticize him daily. His speeches ring hollow against the chants of thousands. You walk past a garrison courtyard where soldiers drill lazily, barely listening to orders, but perk up instantly when a Bolshevik speaker. The provisional government looks increasingly like a silhouette fading behind a bright, encroaching light. And you, navigating the restless streets, realize that the Kornilov affair didn't just strengthen the Bolsheviks, it weakened everyone else. Every accusation, every misstep, every shortage, Autumn deepens, the nights grow longer, and with each new meeting, each shift in the Soviet, each train carrying supporters to Petrograd, you feel the city leaning, not dramatically, not abruptly, but steadily, toward the moment it will step across a threshold it cannot step back from. Because sometimes, history doesn't shout before it arrives. Sometimes it gathers its weight quietly, like snow piling on a rooftop, until gravity decides the time has come. You move with the chill wind curling through Petrograd's alleys as October settles in, the kind of cold that seeps into your sleeves and makes every lamplit street feel like a stage right before the curtain rises. Nothing looks unusual on the surface. Streetcars rattle, sailors stomp across bridges, workers hurry home with collars upturned. Yet you feel it, that quiet density in the air, like the city is holding a secret under its coat. And if you listen closely, really closely, you can hear the hum of preparation beneath everyday noise. The Bolsheviks no longer whisper. They no longer argue about whether the time is right. They argue about the best way to make it unavoidable. You find yourself wandering past their headquarters, where the windows glow late into the night and shadows move like strategists over tables littered with maps, notes, and half-empty cups of weak tea. Members of the Military Revolutionary Committee come and go with folded papers, hurried steps, and expressions that say they'd skip sleep for a week if it meant getting this next part right. A mainstream historical fact anchors your steps. The Bolsheviks plan a precise, almost bloodless uprising, not a spontaneous riot, but a well-coordinated seizure of key infrastructure: bridges, railways, telegraph exchanges, government buildings. No swarming mobs, no dramatic charges, just quiet, controlled, methodical takeover. You get the sense that if they could revolutionize Russia using sticky notes and polite scheduling, they just might. On a damp gray morning, you cross the Litani Bridge and notice Red Guard patrols drilling with a confidence they didn't have 2 months ago. Their boots thud against the wooden planks in practiced rhythm. A few laugh at an inside joke, one involving a commander accidentally sitting on a bayonet. No one knows if that story is true, but the image stays with you because it feels like the kind of slapstick moment revolutions tend to hide behind their dramatic narratives. Historians still argue whether the Bolsheviks' plan was inevitable or whether events pushed them into acting before they felt truly ready. But watching Petrograd now, you sense inevitability rising like frost on windows. Kerensky's government is losing authority by the hour. Prices spike again. Soldiers desert. Workers mutter that winter may freeze the city before the government can feed it.
Every failure becomes a brick in the Bolshevik path.
Then a date emerges, whispered first, spoken later, printed eventually.
The Congress of Soviets approaches, and the Bolsheviks intend to present not demands, but control. You feel the strategy forming like a puzzle snapping into place. If the uprising succeeds before the Congress meets, the Bolsheviks can hand the assembly a finished revolution instead of a request for one. And so, the pieces begin to move. You follow a group of sailors from the Kronstadt base as they arrive in Petrograd. Stoic, windburned, energetic in a way that makes everyone else look half asleep. They swing off trucks like they're dismounting from a ride they barely enjoyed, eager to contribute. Kronstadt sailors are famous for their intensity, their discipline, their unpredictability. A quirky tidbit slips among the crowds. Some Petrograd residents claim the sailors drink tea so strong it could dissolve political uncertainty. Whether or not anyone's actually tried brewing uncertainty in hot water is unclear. Night falls early now, swallowing the city in long shadows that cling between buildings. The Bolsheviks use these shadows well. You walk down a quiet street near the telephone exchange and see red guards leaning casually against walls. Not nervous, not aggressive, just present, watching, waiting. Maybe pretending they're out for an evening stroll, though the rifles give the game away. Then comes the moment when preparation shifts to action. It does not begin with thunder. It begins with footsteps. Red guards and sailors fan out across key intersections. Groups move toward bridges with the calm of people heading to work. The smell of damp wood, coal smoke, and river fog blends into the faint metallic tang of railings as troops quietly take positions. There's no shouting, no gunfire, just purposeful motion. You follow one group as they enter the main telegraph office. The workers inside look up, half expecting chaos, but instead, the Bolsheviks politely inform them that the building is now under revolutionary protection. Some workers shrug and keep typing. One jokes that at least the new guards won't ask for paperwork stamped by 3 different ministries. You can't argue with that. Bridge after bridge falls under control. Railway stations follow. The central post office, the state bank, key government offices. The takeover unfolds like a carefully choreographed dance. You walk through the city and feel as if you're witnessing a silent shift of gravity. Everything looks normal, yet everything has changed. A few soldiers on night patrol glance at the Red Guards and decide this is not their problem tonight. Honestly, you sympathize with them. The final target looms like the ghost of the old regime, the Winter Palace, where the remnants of the provisional government huddle behind heavy doors and thick walls. To your surprise, the palace at this moment is less a grand fortress and more a weary building waiting to be relieved of duty. Its corridors smell faintly of old polish, damp uniforms, and the stress of ministers who haven't slept properly in weeks. You watch as the Bolshevik-aligned forces surround the palace, not with fanfare, but with quiet determination. The Aurora cruiser fires a blank shot across the water, a signal more theatrical than destructive, like a dramatic flourish in an opera. Some people later claim that this shot shook the world, but in truth, most residents probably just wondered if someone dropped a large crate. Historians still argue whether the actual storming of the palace was a tense standoff or a confused shuffle. But as you slip into the growing crowd outside, you see that the moment feels symbolic rather than violent. A few shots echo, doors creak, guards step aside, and Red Guards flow into the halls. The palace doesn't fall, it sighs. Inside, you pass rooms where portraits of Romanovs stare down with vacant, detached calm. A few ministers are arrested without resistance, looking more exhausted than defiant. Someone spills tea. Someone else apologizes for stepping on a rug. Revolutions are rarely tidy, but this one has the strange calm of a building realizing its duties are over. And just like that, without the cinematic battle people later imagine, the provisional government is effectively gone. You hear a Bolshevik soldier whisper, almost reverently, that power has passed to the Soviets. Or at least, that's what he hopes the morning will confirm. You step back onto Palace Square and feel the weight of the moment settle around you. The night air is sharp, almost electric. People murmur softly. A few cheer, more just stare at the Winter Palace, wondering how something so immense could be overtaken so quietly. Somewhere behind you, a worker mutters a joke that this was the politest revolution he's ever been drafted into. Another replies that at least nobody made them fill out forms. And far from Petrograd, in Moscow and other cities, uprisings grow more violent, more contested, more chaotic. But here, in the heart of October's cold breath, you've just witnessed the moment Russia's future swung onto a new track, one that no one, not even the most confident revolutionary, fully understands yet. You wake the next morning to a Petrograd that looks almost the same as yesterday. Same trams rattling down uneven tracks, same vendors setting up makeshift stalls, same crows hopping across icy rooftops. But the city feels different, like someone quietly swapped out the stage set overnight. The Winter Palace stands pale and silent against the gray sky, its enormous windows watching over a country that has just changed direction without asking permission. You feel it as you walk, a subtle vibration in the air, the kind that comes after a storm passes but before people fully grasp what the lightning struck. The Bolsheviks move quickly to consolidate their victory because they know full well that seizing power is only step one. Holding it is the harder part. By midday, they announced the formation of a new government, the Council of People's Commissars, or Sovnarkom. Lenin steps forward, unmistakable even in the crowd of revolutionaries now crowding Smolny Institute, and gives speeches that mix urgency, triumph, and that particular brand of Leninist, we must fix everything immediately intensity. He looks like a man who slept 3 hours and decided that was plenty. A mainstream historical fact grounds your steps. Lenin dissolves the freedom-loving hopes of many factions almost immediately by centralizing authority under Bolshevik control, shutting out moderate socialists who expected a coalition. And as you watch the reactions of those left out, Mensheviks shaking their heads, SR delegates stomping away, you sense this is not unity. It's the beginning of something harsher. The Bolsheviks waste no time addressing the biggest issue looming over Russia like an anvil: the war. Their slogans promised peace, and they intend to deliver it, but the cost will be heavy. Whispers sneak through corridors at Smolny. Territorial losses, population losses, humiliating concessions. People wince at the thought. You overhear one sailor mutter that he'd rather bargain with a hungry wolf than negotiate with the Germans right now. While the Bolsheviks negotiate peace, they also move to silence potential threats. The old police force vanishes almost overnight, replaced by the Cheka, a security agency with a name that sounds innocuous until you meet the agents. You walk by their new headquarters and feel a sharp chill, as if the building itself is inhaling fear. The Cheka officers move with a brisk, silent confidence, wearing expressions so stern they could probably interrogate a lamppost into confessing. A quirky tidbit emerges. Some Petrograd residents whisper that the Cheka's basement lights never turn off, which sounds dramatic, but standing outside on a cold evening, you notice that the windows really do glow at odd hours. Historians still argue whether the Cheka was a necessary response to chaos or an early sign of the authoritarian machine to come. But as you watch people instinctively lower their voices when walking past its doors, you suspect the truth might hold a little of both. The revolution's critics are quick and vocal, too vocal for the Bolsheviks' comfort. Newspapers criticize the new government for seizing power by force. Academics warn of creeping dictatorship. Workers in some factories complain that the new leaders haven't magically fixed supply issues in 24 hours. The Bolsheviks respond sharply. Opposition papers are shut down. Critics are detained. Dissent is reframed as sabotage. It happens fast, so fast you catch yourself blinking and wondering when exactly the tone shifted from hopeful to hard. Then comes the monumental moment.
elections for the Constituent Assembly, long promised as Russia's democratic future. You watch people line up to vote in the cold, clutching papers, hopeful that this, finally, will stabilize the nation. The results? The socialist revolutionaries win the majority, the Bolsheviks only second place. The public has spoken, but Lenin isn't interested in being second. A day after the assembly meets, he dissolves it, just dissolves it. A building full of elected representatives sent home like students dismissed for summer break. You see the shock ripple through the city. Some gasp, some mutter, some shrug because, honestly, ignoring the rules seems to be the new political hobby of 1917. But the significance is unmistakable. Whatever pluralism existed is now fading like morning frost under an unforgiving sun. Opposition groups react immediately. Liberals denounce the Bolsheviks as tyrants. Moderate socialists call it a betrayal of everything the revolution stood for. Monarchists, scattered and demoralized, whisper about the return of order. And in the countryside, peasants start wondering whether the new rulers will let them keep the land they've begun seizing from landlords. The tension hums like a violin string pulled too tight. And beneath all these debates, the shadow of civil war begins to form. Small uprisings flicker across different regions. Local militias clash with Red Guards. Officers flee the capital to organize resistance. You hear rumors of underground groups plotting, of old generals sending secret letters, of nationalists gathering in the south. It's all disjointed, small, uncoordinated, but growing. The Bolsheviks, sensing the threat, harden their stance. The Cheka expands. Decrees become sharper. The language used in speeches shifts, no longer about freeing the people, but defending the revolution. You feel the temperature drop in conversations. People talk less openly. They glance over their shoulders more often. Even the jokes grow quieter, though one black-humored whisper circulates. Under the Tsar, you feared the police. Under the Bolsheviks, you fear your neighbor. You aren't sure whether to laugh or shiver. Then, as winter deepens, the treaty negotiations intensify. Germany demands huge swaths of land, territories full of rich farmland, industry, and people. The proposal horrifies the public. Crowds argue in the streets. Soldiers shout angrily. Some Bolsheviks argue against accepting such humiliation. But Lenin pushes forward, convinced that internal survival matters more than external pride. Historians still argue whether signing this treaty was strategic brilliance or catastrophic short-sightedness. But when you watch the final agreements roll out, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, you can feel the shockwave it sends through the nation. Russia loses vast territories, millions of people, key economic regions. It's like watching someone slice off the limbs of a giant and expecting it to keep standing. Suddenly, the opposition isn't just political, it's national. Officers defect. Regional leaders revolt. Foreign powers prepare to intervene. Old monarchists, liberals, patriots, nationalists, and disillusioned socialists find a shared hatred for the Bolsheviks. The tinder is laid, the spark is near. And as you walk the streets after the treaty is announced, hearing curses in dozens of dialects, seeing crowds argue violently, feeling the tension thicken the air, you realize the city is no longer holding its breath. It's exhaling war. You drift into the months following Brest-Litovsk, and the air feels heavier now, colder, sharper, carrying a tension that clings to your coat like sleet. Russia is no longer a country simply changing governments. It's a fractured landscape humming with rival agendas, secret plots, and armies both forming and dissolving like smoke. When you step through Petrograd's streets, you notice how people's voices drop when discussing politics, as if the walls themselves might be listening. And honestly, after watching the Cheka tighten its grip, you don't entirely blame them. What begins next doesn't look like a civil war at first. It looks like a country unraveling thread by thread. A Cossack band rebels here. A regiment refuses orders there. Local councils pledge allegiance to no one but themselves. And then you begin to hear something else. The heavy boots of foreign soldiers stepping onto Russian soil, each group claiming a different reason for arriving. A mainstream historical fact stands tall amid this confusion. Britain, France, the United States, Japan, Romania, and others land troops across Russia in 1918. Their stated goal to reopen the Eastern Front against Germany and stabilize the situation. In practice, they mostly add kerosene to an already roaring fire.
You feel their presence first in whispers. British Marines appearing in the Arctic North. French officers stepping off ships in the Black Sea. American expeditionary forces in Archangel and Vladivostok. Japanese troops, tens of thousands of them, spreading through Siberia with a confidence that makes local villagers blink twice. You overhear one old man mutter that Russia is becoming a revolutionary tourist attraction, though the humor barely masks his fear.
A quirky tidbit circulates among the docks in Murmansk. Someone claims that American troops complained about the cold so fiercely that locals started calling one battalion the Frozen Yankees. Historians still argue whether this nickname was affectionate or mocking, or if it even existed beyond one sarcastic fisherman, but it certainly paints a picture. Each foreign power has its own agenda. Britain wants to contain Germany. France wants repayment on debts the Tsar had promised. The US insists it's protecting supplies and citizens. Japan looks around Siberia like a shopper eyeing a sale rack. And the Czechoslovak Legion, tens of thousands of armed, battle-hardened soldiers stranded across the Trans-Siberian Railway, becomes one of the most unpredictable forces in the entire conflict. You pass a railway station and see Legion soldiers, Czechs and Slovaks who once fought for Austria-Hungary but defected to the Allies, now guarding long trains loaded with supplies. They look exhausted, determined, and increasingly annoyed at Bolshevik attempts to disarm them. You sense the tension crackling. Then word spreads. A skirmish breaks out between legionnaires and Bolsheviks along the railway. A small fight, but it triggers something enormous. Legion forces seize segments of the Trans-Siberian line, capturing city after city with an efficiency that makes everyone else look like they're moving through molasses. Historians still argue exactly who fired the first shot, but the consequences are clear. The Czechoslovak Legion becomes the spine of the emerging White Movement, an anti-Bolshevik coalition that grows from scattered discontent into a force capable of carving vast territories out of Russia's heartland. And so the Whites emerge, not as a unified faction, but as an accidental alliance of groups who dislike each other almost as much as they dislike the Bolsheviks. Monarchists yearning for the old order, liberals who dream of a democratic Russia, nationalists who want unity, socialist factions that despise Lenin's one-party rule. Some want a return to the Tsar, some want a republic, some just want order. They disagree on nearly everything except this: the Bolsheviks must go. As you travel farther from Petrograd, imagining stepping onto dusty roads in Siberia or trudging through muddy fields of the Volga, you see entire cities fall under white control. Town halls fly new flags every few weeks. Shops reopen only to close again. Soldiers switch sides or simply run home. The map of Russia begins to look like a half-finished quilt stitched together by drunk tailors. In the Ural Mountains, another shadow grows long: the imprisoned Romanov family. You walk past whispers in taverns, drafty barracks, railway posts. Will they be rescued? Will the Whites reach them in time? But in July 1918, a truth emerges so stark it silences entire rooms. The Romanovs, every last one, are executed by Bolsheviks, afraid the advancing Whites will liberate them. The news spreads with the speed of a lightning strike. People gasp, some weep, some cheer. Some stare at the ground, wondering if Russia has now crossed a line it can never return from. You breathe deeply, feeling the weight of that moment press down on your shoulders. The Civil War no longer feels like scattered chaos. It feels personal, cultural, historical. The kind of conflict that doesn't just determine who rules, but what Russia is. As the months roll on, you begin hearing darker stories, ones whispered in alleys, muttered at campfires, scribbled into letters carried across enemy lines. The Red Terror, Bolshevik reprisals, executions without trial, hostages taken, alleged conspirators arrested in sweeping raids. The Cheka grows bold, then brazen, then feared. One mainstream fact circles widely. Over 15,000 people are killed in the first months of the Red Terror alone. In Petrograd, you watch Red Guards march detainees through the streets. Some civilians avert their eyes, others stare hard, as if wanting to memorize the face of repression. But you also hear, and sometimes witness, the White Terror, equally brutal and often far more chaotic. Cossack units burning villages suspected of supporting Bolsheviks, officers carrying out mass executions, nationalist militias attacking anyone who speaks with the wrong accent. Worst of all, anti-Jewish pogroms erupt across territories held by white forces, leaving devastation and grief in their wake. It's a kind of cruelty that makes people whisper that the war has peeled away Russia's soul. Historians still argue which side committed more atrocities or which terror was more systematic. But walking through these moments, you understand something grim. Ordinary civilians suffer no matter which flag flies over the nearest garrison. Foreign soldiers witness this brutality too, and many are disturbed by it. You overhear a British officer describe the conflict as a nightmare without sides, and an American medic mutter that no textbook prepared him for what he's seen. Japanese troops remain distant, cool, aloof, helpful when it suits them, indifferent otherwise. Everyone claims to be here to help, yet somehow the presence of all these foreign boots only deepens the sense that Russia has become a battlefield with no neutral ground left. And through it all, you can feel the center pulling apart further each week. Roads fill with refugees fleeing from one territory to another, only to discover the next region is just as dangerous. Supply lines collapse. Hunger stalks cities. Wolves grow bolder in the countryside, following columns of soldiers in the hope of scavenging. You realize, as you stand in the swirl of rumors, footsteps, and smoke, that this is no longer the Russia of February 1917. This is a fractured world in which competing armies, foreign powers, wandering legions, and clashing ideologies all converge into a storm that will only grow more violent before it begins to fade. And somewhere ahead, the Red Army and the White Movement prepare for the immense, bloody confrontations that will decide the fate of the entire land. You drift deeper into the war-torn landscape of 1918 to 1919, and the world around you feels split into jagged shards, territories changing hands, loyalties bending or breaking, and every rumor carried on cold winds that bite your ears. By now, the Civil War isn't a distant fear. It's the background noise of daily life, like the clatter of a broken pipe you've given up trying to fix. Everywhere you travel, whether through forests humming with winter wind, muddy roads slick with thaw, or cramped towns where refugees sleep in abandoned shops, you sense that the conflict is shifting from chaos to something larger, more coordinated, and far more brutal. The Bolsheviks, sensing danger from every direction, implement war communism, a system that sounds efficient in theory and feels like a vice grip in practice. A mainstream historical fact anchors your steps here. War communism nationalizes all major industries, bans private trade, and requisitions grain directly from peasants to feed the Red Army. When you pass through a factory seized by the new government, you notice the atmosphere immediately. Workers no longer negotiate with owners, but receive orders from state-appointed managers who look like they haven't slept since Tsarist times. Machines shriek, tools clatter, and the workers' faces carry the same hollow endurance you see everywhere now, as if their bodies have learned to move automatically even when their minds drift somewhere far quieter. Food requisitions hit the countryside even harder. You walk through a village where Red Army detachments confiscate grain, leaving peasants staring at empty barns with the kind of tight-jawed fury that doesn't fade quickly. One woman mutters that the revolution promised land to the peasants, but forgot to mention they wouldn't be allowed to keep what grew on it. A quirky tidbit circulates in rural taverns. Peasants joke that the Bolsheviks must be raising invisible horses because they demand so much grain that only a phantom cavalry could possibly need it. The humor is thin, stretched like a worn coat in winter, but it survives because laughing is easier than screaming. Historians still argue whether war communism was driven by ideology or desperation. But as you watch Red Army wagons roll off with the village's last sacks of flour, you feel the policy's sharp edges. People hide food in fields, bury sacks under snow, carve secret compartments into their floors. And the Cheka, never far behind, hunts for these hiding places with a relentlessness that turns fear into a permanent houseguest. Despite the hardships, the Red Army grows, not just in numbers, but in organization. Trotsky travels constantly by armored train, giving speeches that seem to stitch shattered morale back together with sheer force of will. His train becomes a kind of mobile command center, plastered with red slogans and bristling with weapons. You catch sight of it once near a rail junction, smoke curling from its chimney, Trotsky standing on the platform in a long coat, glasses glinting. He speaks to soldiers with a clipped intensity that feels both inspiring and exhausting. Some love him, some fear him, all obey him. As the Reds consolidate, the Whites rally too, driven by the momentum gained from foreign support and regional uprisings. You find yourself drifting through territories under their control, where officers in crisp uniforms bark orders while arguing among themselves about what Russia should look like after victory. Monarchists want a czar, liberals want a republic, nationalists want unity. Cadets want parliamentary governance. It's like watching a committee try to paint a mural while using 20 different brushes and refusing to agree on the color palette. The lack of unity shows. White territories, despite early successes, feel brittle. You notice how local peasants greet white detachments with distrust. Many remember harsh landowner practices and don't want them back. Townsfolk grumble that the whites demand discipline but provide little food. Soldiers complain that supplies don't arrive when promised. Historians still argue whether the whites failed because of ideology or disorganization, but walking through their zones, you see both. Then the terror escalates, brutal, sweeping, merciless on all sides. The Red Terror intensifies, fueled by paranoia, assassination attempts, and the growing belief that enemies lurk behind every locked door. You watch Cheka agents drag suspects from their homes at night, boots thudding on staircases, lantern light flickering against the walls. Sometimes the accusations seem political, sometimes personal, sometimes arbitrary. But white-controlled regions carry their own darkness. You witness the White Terror, characterized by summary executions, pogroms, vengeance against suspected Bolshevik sympathizers, and scorched earth tactics. In one village, smoke still rises from burned houses. In another, you see a line of prisoners marched past you with heads lowered, guards whipping them forward. A shopkeeper whispers that speaking too boldly gets you arrested by one side and shot by the other. He doesn't say it with anger, just weary certainty. One quirky and unsettling rumor you hear. Some towns hang two flags, red during the day when Bolsheviks patrol, white at night when monarchist sympathizers sneak in. Historians still debate whether this actually happened or if it spread as biting wartime folklore, but it captures the impossible tightrope civilians walk. Foreign soldiers observe all of this with unease. Some detachments try to maintain neutrality, others get dragged into local conflicts. You overhear a French officer lament that the war feels like a theater where every actor improvises badly. American medics treat wounded civilians who speak no English, but whose eyes convey everything. Japanese officers, stoic and strategically minded, move through Siberian towns with a discipline that often unnerves locals.
Meanwhile, the economy collapses deeper into ruin.
Factories stutter, trains derail from poor maintenance, epidemics spread through refugee camps. And while all this churns around you, the conflict narrows towards something sharper. Key battles, major offensives, armies moving not like improvisational mobs, but like forces aiming for decisive victory. You see the storm clouds gathering, feel them press against your skin, sense them humming like charged air before lightning. Because soon, the Whites will launch massive campaigns, westward from Siberia, northward toward Petrograd, north and south toward Moscow. And the Reds will respond with a fury powered by desperation and a logistical network stitched together by Trotsky's relentless discipline. The war is no longer simply beginning. It's shifting into its most dangerous phase, one where the fate of Russia will hinge on tens of thousands of armed men converging onto the targets that matter most. You feel the civil war tightening like a fist around the vast Russian landscape as 1919 arrives, the kind of year where every road seems to lead to another front line, every rumor smells like gunpowder, and every sunrise carries the uneasy question, who's advancing today? The world you move through now is louder, harsher, more directional than the chaotic swirl of 1918. The Whites, fragmented but determined, are no longer just reacting, they're advancing, pushing toward the Bolshevik heartlands with the kind of pressure that makes even seasoned Red commanders lose sleep. You first sense the shift in Siberia, where Admiral Alexander Kolchak, a former naval officer with a stern jaw and a talent for sterner speeches, declares himself supreme ruler of Russia. A mainstream historical fact drops hard here. Kolchak's forces surge westward in early 1919, reaching dangerously close to the Volga River, the artery that leads straight toward Moscow. You travel along frost-bitten railway lines near Yekaterinburg and see Kolchak's officers carrying maps pinned with blue flags marking city after city taken from the Reds. Trains rumble past, loaded with soldiers wearing thick coats, boots caked in ice, and expressions caught between hope and exhaustion. But the deeper you walk into Kolchak's territory, the more cracks you notice. Supply trains break down. Villages go silent when officers ride through. Refugees whisper that requisitions feel no different from the Reds, except with rougher manners. Historians still argue whether Kolchak's harshness was necessity or misjudgment, but the resentment simmering in peasant huts feels unmistakably real. While Siberia pushes west, the south ignites. General Anton Denikin, commanding the armed forces of South Russia, launches his ambitious and infamous Moscow Directive. His armies surge north across dusty plains, capturing cities like Tsaritsyn and rolling upward through the Black Earth Belt with the momentum of a storm tide. When you pass through towns newly under White control, you see churches reopening, landlords returning with cautious optimism, and officers drilling troops with sharp southern accents. At first, Denikin's movement feels unstoppable. Trains loaded with ammunition arrive on time, cavalry units gallop in tight formation, and foreign aid trickles through Black Sea ports in neat wooden crates stamped with foreign lettering. Leaflets scatter across cafes proclaiming, "Moscow by winter." A quirky tidbit circulates. Some white officers allegedly carried pocket watches set to the hour they expected to march into the Kremlin. Whether true or just boastful myth, it captures the confidence vibrating through the ranks. And then there's Yudenich, the quiet, calculating general in the northwest. His forces, though smaller, are among the most disciplined of the Whites. As you move near the Baltic region, you notice how Estonian units march beside Yudenich's troops, bayonets glinting beneath gray skies. They push toward Petrograd with unsettling speed, reaching the city's outskirts by autumn. Suddenly Petrograd, birthplace of the revolution, feels vulnerable for the first time since the Winter Palace fell. Street patrols double, Red Guards drill harder. You hear arguments and breadlines about whether to flee east or stay and fight. For a terrifying moment, you feel the Reds wobble. All three fronts, east, south, and north, press inward like jaws closing around a throat. Maps in Soviet headquarters show enemy arrows converging dangerously. Food shortages bite, troops grow thin. You overhear exhausted commanders muttering that the Reds may lose both capitals, Moscow and Petrograd, before the year ends. Historians still debate whether this was truly the moment when Bolshevik survival hung by its last thread. But standing here, watching telegram operators scramble and Red soldiers march with hollow cheeks, it certainly feels like it. Yet the Whites suffer from the same disease that plagued them from the start: coordination failure. Kolchak, Denikin, and Yudenich operate like rival musicians trying to perform a symphony without listening to each other. Their offensives peak at different times, their supply needs clash, and their strategies collide with political disagreements sharper than their bayonets. You travel between White territories and feel the disunity firsthand. Officers complain that Kolchak's men don't communicate. Kolchak's men complain that Denikin sends no support. Yudenich curses the lack of reinforcements. Everyone blames someone else. It's like watching three grandmasters play chess on the same board while refusing to acknowledge the other pieces. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks unleash their secret weapon, Trotsky's logistical brilliance. He races between fronts on his armored train, a moving command center coated in steel plates and slogans. You see it again near Kazan, steam billowing, machine guns mounted on the roof, Trotsky himself pacing the platform with clipped precision. He reorganizes failing units, executes deserters, rewards loyal ones, and turns chaos into structure with alarming speed. Railways become the Red Army's arteries, and cavalry its beating heart. You watch Semyon Budyonny's cavalry gallop across open fields, long coats flowing, horses snorting steam, moving so fast they seem to rewrite the war map daily. A quirky tidbit: Budyonny allegedly braided his horse's tail with little red ribbons during key offensives. Whether it's true or just romantic wartime embellishment, the mental image sticks. Then there are the peasants, the silent, massive force that ultimately shapes the war's fate. They dislike the Reds' grain requisitions, but distrust the Whites far more, seeing them as a doorway back to landlord domination. When Denikin's officers storm into villages demanding supplies and obedience, peasants quietly sabotage them, misdirecting scouts, hiding grain, whispering rumors that erode morale. Small, local uprisings stab into White rear lines like thousands of tiny knives. This hostility saps White strength. Supply lines stretch too far. Armies overextend. Disease spreads. Ammunition runs low. Soldiers become disillusioned. Some desert, some switch sides, some simply disappear into forests. And then it happens. The Bolsheviks counterattack. Kolchak's armies, straining toward the Volga, are pushed back by coordinated Red thrusts. You watch panic spread at rail depots as officers shout contradictory orders. Maps show red arrows slicing through Siberian routes. Towns fall in reverse order of their conquest. Winter approaches, and Kolchak's men retreat in frost-bitten misery. To the north, Yudenich's forces reach Petrograd's gates, but Trotsky's reinforcements flood in. Latvia withdraws support, and the offensive collapses into a desperate backward shuffle. Denikin's proud march on Moscow slows, then halts, then crumbles as Red counteroffensives carve through supply lines. Cavalry hits his flanks. Guerrilla peasants strike his rear. Soldiers mutter bitterly that the march was cursed from the start. And as you move across battlefields littered with muddy boots, broken rifles, and abandoned wagons, you feel history tilt again. Not gently, but sharply, like ice cracking under sudden weight. The Reds almost lose everything in 1919. Then, the whites lose everything instead.
You step forward into the long, cracking winter of late 1919 and early 1920, and the world around you feels like it's been scraped raw. The Great White Offensives have peaked, faltered, and finally begun to bleed backward, leaving behind scorched fields, shattered rail bridges, and entire towns that look like they woke from a fever dream, only to find the fever still simmering in the air. The Red counterattacks are no longer desperate scrambles. They're deliberate, paced, layered, like the breaths of someone who knows they've finally regained their footing. You sense the shift, first in Siberia, where the retreat turns from strategic to chaotic. News spreads that Kolchak's regime is collapsing, and you feel that collapse in every frostbitten outpost you pass. Soldiers trudge west with blank eyes and torn boots, uniforms stiff with ice, rifles slung over shoulders not out of readiness, but habit. A mainstream historical fact lands heavily here. Kolchak is captured in early 1920 and executed soon after, his authority dissolving with the finality of a candle guttering out in winter wind. You walk near the frozen Irtysh River and overhear peasants discussing his fate with a mix of fear, relief, and exhausted indifference. One mutters that he never cared who ruled as long as his children had bread, something they still don't have. Another jokes bitterly that at least the river now has one less angry officer breaking the ice. You're not sure whether to laugh or wince. Historians still argue whether Kolchak could have survived with different allies or strategies. But on these cold roads, the debate feels distant compared to the crunch of retreating boots. As Red forces push eastward, the White command structure fractures into competing fragments. Officers argue over train schedules, retreat routes, even which units deserve the last handful of ammunition. Underfed horses collapse in snowdrifts. Rail cars meant for civilians carry panicked officers instead. Towns that once flew white banners now greet red detachments with weary resignation. You see children staring at the soldiers' sleds with hungry curiosity, wondering if the war will finally end or simply change uniform colors again. Further west, Yudenich's once formidable army shrinks like a snowbank under a hard sun. You arrive in a Baltic railway station as his men, defeated and frostbitten, shuffle aboard trains headed toward Estonia. Their uniforms look like patchwork quilts stitched from stolen blankets. Their spirits are brittle. The Estonian government, wary of Bolshevik retaliation, signs peace with the Reds and politely shows Yudenich the border. A quirky tidbit floats around cafes in Tallinn. Some locals claim Yudenich's entire army marched into Estonia, only for officials to respond with a diplomatic equivalent of, "You can stay one night, but please take your mess with you." Whether exaggerated or not, the image fits the mood. In the south, Denikin's command collapses under the weight of its own ambition. You walk dusty roads across the Don region, where Cossack detachments once galloped proudly. Now you find burned-out wagons, half-frozen trenches, and soldiers lying beside campfires that barely warm their fingers. Retreating white officers shout about reorganizing, but the words sound hollow. Red cavalry, Bojani's men, appear on the horizon like swift, red-tinted shadows, hooves thundering, horsehair whipping in winter wind. Their speed and mobility cut through white lines like scissors through brittle cloth. Denikin, exhausted and outmaneuvered, resigns. His replacement is the calm, pragmatic General Pyotr Wrangel, known for his black uniform and sharper intellect. You see him gather remaining troops in Crimea with the precision of a surgeon trying to salvage a dying patient. Wrangel introduces reforms, land policies aimed at courting peasants, strict discipline, and attempts at more humane administration. Historians still argue whether these reforms would have mattered if applied earlier, but in 1920, they feel too little, too late. You travel to Sevastopol and find the city bracing for a storm. Wrangel's White Army tries to become efficient, disciplined, principled, But supplies are thin, morale thinner, and Crimea, though defensible, isn't a kingdom big enough to revive a collapsing empire. You pass troops training on the beach as Black Sea waves crash nearby. Their rifles gleam, but their eyes reveal deep fatigue, like men who have learned too often that hope is a dangerous luxury. Meanwhile, the Red Army grows stronger with each victory. Factories in Moscow and Petrograd sputter, but still produce shells, uniforms, and boots. Trotsky's armored train darts across fronts like a steel nerve center. Soldiers once hungry and ragged now receive better rations and firmer leadership. And everywhere, the Reds push forward not just with armies, but with propaganda. Posters, newspapers, speeches reminding civilians that the future belongs to them if they endure a little longer. But not everyone accepts Bolshevik control quietly. In Ukraine and southern Russia, you feel a different force rumbling beneath the war's surface. The anarchist Black Army of Nestor Makhno. He leads an autonomous zone known as Makhnovia, a patchwork of villages running on anarchist principles, free of landlords and commissars alike. When you enter one such village, you see locals distributing grain by committee, hosting loud debates in communal squares, and treating authority like a contagious illness. Makhno's cavalry rides past you, fast, fierce, chaotic. Their black banners flap like crow's wings. They fight whites, nationalists, and sometimes reds, shifting alliances with the practicality of people who just want to survive on their own terms. A quirky detail: some villagers insist Makhno could shoot 2 pistols simultaneously while riding backward on his horse. Whether true or heroic folklore, it captures the legend swirling around him. Historians still argue whether Makhno was a visionary or a warlord. But watching his troops gallop across dusty Ukrainian plains, you sense he embodied both possibilities. And that ambiguity is exactly why the Bolsheviks eventually decide he cannot remain. Then there are the Green Armies, peasant uprisings simmering in forests and marshlands. They fight whoever steals their grain, red or white. They melt into woods at dusk, reappear at dawn, sabotage supply lines with quiet precision. You speak with a peasant who shrugs and says, "If a man comes to take my harvest, he is my enemy." Simple, brutal, true. The Bolsheviks treat these rebellions as infections. They send troops, they send Cheka units. In some cases, especially against larger uprisings, they reportedly even deploy chemical agents, burning the memory of those battles into the soil itself. And then comes the Kronstadt Rebellion of 1921, a shockwave you feel even from afar. The sailors of Kronstadt, once icons of Bolshevik revolution, rise up demanding free elections, freedom of speech, and an end to grain requisitions. When you hear the news, it feels like learning that your closest friend has begun whispering about leaving you. Petrograd trembles. The ice between the city and the fortress becomes a battlefield as Red troops advance across frozen Gulf waters under heavy fire. The assault is brutal, and by its end, thousands of sailors are dead or fleeing. Lenin calls them white agents. Others call them heroes. You simply feel the tragedy settling like frost across the heart of the revolution itself. And as Kronstadt falls silent, Wrangel holds Crimea like a final candle in a dark room. But the Red Army finally breaches the peninsula, driving white forces toward the sea. Thousands flee on ships, families clutching bundles, officers staring hollow-eyed at the horizon, wondering if they'll ever see Russia again. Red reprisals follow swiftly, harshly, leaving no doubt that the war is nearing its final, merciless resolution. You walk along a Crimean cliff after the final evacuation ships disappear and feel the wind cutting across your face. The war is not done yet, but it is ending. One side has momentum. One side has men, supplies, structure, and territory. And the whites, battered and fragmented, have only exile left. You step into the early 1920s with a strange sense of déjà vu. Russia looks like a land that should finally be done breaking, yet somehow keeps finding new seams to split open.
The Great White Offensives have collapsed, their generals scattered across borders or oceans, but the war refuses to end cleanly. It mutates instead, sprouting new fronts, fresh rebellions, and factions that fight not for power alone, but for visions of entirely different futures. You move through this landscape like someone wandering through the aftershocks of an earthquake. Everywhere you go, the ground still trembles. The Red Army grows stronger with each passing month, but victory is hardly serene. Regions once held by the Whites are riddled with small wars, guerrilla bands, starvation, and old grievances surfacing like stones in thawing soil. And then you hear it, not the clang of artillery or the whistle of incoming shells, but the thunder of hooves, the arrival of Nestor Makhno's Black Army, refusing to fade as quickly as the Whites. Makhno's territory, Makhnovia, sprawls across southeastern Ukraine like a rebellious inkblot. A mainstream historical fact, Makhno's movement at its height controls an autonomous region nearly the size of a European country, operating on anarchist principles that make Bolshevik commissars twitch. You walk into one of his villages and immediately sense the difference. No portraits of Lenin stare down from walls. No officers bark orders. Instead, villagers gather in loud assemblies that look equal parts meeting and festival. They argue, laugh, vote, then argue again. The air smells of bread ovens and horse sweat, not bureaucracy. Then you see Makhno himself, or at least you think you do. A lean man on a dark horse, riding fast across a dusty field with his cavalry, their black banners snapping behind them like ravens' wings caught mid-flight. A quirky tidbit circulates here, one villagers insist is true. Makhno could balance on his horse's saddle while firing twin pistols in opposite directions. Whether he practiced acrobatics or just benefited from battlefield exaggeration, you can't say. But as you watch his riders loop around like swarms of locusts, it doesn't seem impossible. Yet this freedom carries its own stress. Makhno's forces fight everyone: Whites, Ukrainian nationalists, German remnants, rogue warlords, and eventually the Bolsheviks themselves. His territory remains a tinderbox, political friction turning villages into battlegrounds overnight. Historians still argue whether Makhno could have built a lasting state, or whether his anarchist dream was doomed the moment it required defending with armies larger than campfire gatherings. And while Makhno rides, another force rises from the forests: the Green Armies. Peasant rebels, neither red nor white, who fight whoever dares steal their grain, be it requisition squads, bandits, or state officials. They melt into woods at dusk and surge out at dawn, a shadow war the Bolsheviks can't fully map. You pass a village where green fighters once attacked a red supply post, leaving behind footprints, spent shells, and angry graffiti about food thieves in red coats. Their motivations are simple, brutal, and consistent. One peasant explains it to you plainly: "I harvest for my family, not for Moscow." It's hard to argue with a man holding a pitchfork like it's an extension of his soul. These rebellions worry the Bolsheviks more than they publicly admit. They stretch resources thin, disrupt grain routes, force the Red Army into exhausting mop-up operations, and fracture the image of an emerging centralized state. And then comes the blow that stings the Bolsheviks deepest of all: the Kronstadt Rebellion. Travel with the icy wind across the Gulf of Finland, and you reach the fortress island of Kronstadt, the same naval base whose sailors had been the revolution's fiercest supporters in 1917. But in 1921, something in them breaks. You hear their demands through intercepted pamphlets and whispered news: freedom of speech, new elections to the Soviets, an end to grain seizures, an end to one-party rule. A mainstream historical fact anchors this moment. The Kronstadt sailors declare that the revolution has been betrayed and demand its renewal. The shock of this declaration ripples through Petrograd like a sudden frost. If the revolution's own vanguard rebels, what does that say about the state emerging in their name? Lenin, Trotsky, and the leadership respond quickly and harshly. The rebellion is labeled counter-revolutionary, even foreign-backed. The ice between Kronstadt and the mainland becomes a frozen battlefield. You can almost feel the cold slicing into your skin as Red troops advance across cracking, groaning ice sheets under machine gun fire. Soldiers wrap scarves around their faces, not for warmth, but to protect against blinding snow kicked up by bullets. The assault is brutal. Not heroic, not glamorous, just grim. The Reds push forward, falling, rising, dragging wounded comrades as ice fractures beneath their boots. When they finally breach Kronstadt, the fighting spills through corridors dimly lit by failing lamps. By nightfall, the rebellion is crushed. Survivors flee across the ice into Finland. Those captured face execution or years of prison labor. Historians still argue whether the Kronstadt sailors were idealists betrayed or rebels misled by desperation. But as you walk through their abandoned barracks, boots scattered, papers left half-written, you feel something deeper. The revolution has devoured part of its own identity. Meanwhile, in the south, Wrangel's Crimea becomes the final white stronghold, a battered peninsula clinging to hope like a lantern in a storm. Wrangel reorganizes, reforms, negotiates, pleads. For a moment, his disciplined forces hold their lines against the Reds, but the Bolsheviks are relentless. Their armies sweep down the peninsula, cutting through defenses with cold precision. You find yourself standing on a cliff overlooking the harbor of Sevastopol during the final evacuation. Ships crowded with refugees, officers staring hollow-eyed at the horizon, children gripping blankets as though they anchor them to safety. The sea wind carries the smell of coal, salt, and quiet heartbreak. When the last white ships vanish beyond the horizon, Red troops enter Crimea. What follows is swift and merciless. Thousands executed, thousands more arrested. The peninsula falls silent in a way that feels eerie, like a room where someone extinguished the last candle. Yet even victory doesn't bring peace. The countryside still roils with green insurgents. Makhno fights a final, desperate campaign before fleeing into exile. Peasants resist requisitions. The Red Army hunts down holdouts through forests, snowfields, marshes. Slow, grueling work that takes months. And then, in late 1920 and into 1921, the rebellions begin to dim. Not because the anger dies, but because exhaustion finally crushes it. Villages bury their dead. Soldiers limp home. Children look at empty fields and wonder if spring will bring more than mud. You walk through a quiet valley at dusk, hearing only distant crows. No gunfire, no shouted orders. Just the slow settling of a land drained by years of conflict. The Red victory is nearly complete now, but not before the last major foreign and national conflict still flickering beyond Russia's borders comes crashing into view. Poland. The war is ending, but not before one more explosion rattles the map. You step into the early 1920s with the feeling that Russia has become a house filled with half-extinguished fires. Some still smoldering in corners, others flaring suddenly as if refusing to die quietly. The Whites have fallen. Crimea has emptied into exile. Makhno's banners have faded into the fields. But the land is not at peace yet, not even close. Instead, you move through a countryside that feels bruised, swollen, and suspicious of everyone wearing a uniform. The war is shifting, not ending. Foreign powers begin pulling out of Russia, one by one, and you can feel the withdrawal like a tide receding from a battered beach. In the far north, British and American troops board ships in Archangel, boots thudding on gangplanks slick with frost. French units in Odessa pack crates of supplies while locals glare, some grateful, some furious, most simply exhausted. You watch Romanian detachments march back across borders, their flags drooping like wilted leaves. A mainstream historical fact settles here. Most Allied forces leave Russia by 1920, their governments bowing to public pressure, financial strain, and the growing recognition that the Civil War will not go the way they hoped. But not everyone leaves quickly. In the far reaches of Siberia, Japan stays behind.
lingering like a guest who keeps forgetting their coat so they have an excuse to return. Japanese troops entrenched themselves in Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, and stretches of the Amur region, guarding railways, collecting economic concessions, and waiting for something. Their motives feel slippery. They smile politely while refusing to actually go home. A quirky tidbit spreads among Russian villagers. Some claim Japanese officers bow so gracefully that you barely notice how many rifles their units are carrying. Historians still argue whether Japan intended long-term occupation or was merely hedging its bets, but the tension hangs in the cold air like a blade. You travel along the Trans-Siberian Railway and see entire sections patrolled by foreign troops, Czech legionnaires still guarding their long trains of supplies as they await transport to Europe. These hardened soldiers, once the backbone of early white successes, now simply want to leave the endless vastness of Russia behind. Some spend their days trading trinkets with villagers, others carving chess pieces from scraps of metal. One legionnaire jokes that he'll scream if he has to see one more Siberian birch tree. You almost sympathize. Further west, Poland watches the Russian chaos with wary determination. And in 1920, while the Red Army is still fighting pockets of resistance, Poland strikes. Their forces surge eastward with surprising speed, capturing Kyiv and pushing deep into Ukrainian territory. You feel the shock ripple through red command posts from Minsk to Smolensk. Telegram lines buzz. Maps are unrolled. Officers argue in frantic circles. The Bolsheviks assume the whites were the last threat. Now they face a young nation intent on shaping its borders by force. You drift with the Red Army as they regroup, calling in reserves, redirecting supplies, and stretching their newly rebuilt command structure to deal with yet another front. For a moment, you sense real fear. Fear that the fragile Soviet state, still licking its wounds from civil war, might be carved apart before it stabilizes. But then, the momentum swings again. Red Armies counterattack. The Polish advance falters. Confidence surges. Soviet troops chase the Polish forces westward until they are pressing toward Warsaw itself. It feels like the Bolsheviks are about to cement their triumph across all of Eastern Europe. And then comes the shock, known as the miracle on the Vistula. Historians still argue whether the Polish victory resulted from brilliant strategy, Soviet mistakes, or sheer cosmic irony. But as you listen to survivors describe the battle, you feel the weight of it. Polish forces launch a daring counterstroke, smashing through Soviet lines, encircling units, and sending entire regiments into chaotic retreat. What looked like a triumphant march suddenly becomes a panicked scramble. Red soldiers flee across fields, abandon artillery, and wade through rivers waist-deep with fear and exhaustion. You pass refugees, some Red soldiers, some local civilians, stumbling along country roads near Brest-Litovsk, muttering about ambushes, lost orders, and commanders shouting contradictory instructions in the haze of battle. Horses lie dead along paths. Burned wagons litter riverbanks. You sense the humiliation hitting the Red Army like a cold slap. A few soldiers try joking about the defeat to mask the sting. One mutters that even the Polish geese honked at us as we ran. But the humor can't soften the reality. Poland and Soviet Russia signed the Treaty of Riga in October 1920, drawing a border far east of what Lenin hoped. The Reds swallow their frustration because, frankly, they need to. They have other enemies waiting. With the Polish front closed, the Red Army turns south again, toward Wrangel, the last white commander still holding out in Crimea. You feel the shift immediately. The Reds move with grim efficiency, like workers finishing the final, bitter task of a long shift. Units march across steppe land hardened by frost. Commissars deliver short speeches about ending the past once and for all. Trotsky's trains arrive with supplies and reinforcements, red stars gleaming against steel. Wrangel's troops are disciplined, better organized than Denikin's ragged forces had been. and bolstered by refugees determined not to fall into Bolshevik hands. You see families crowd into makeshift camps around Sevastopol, packing heirlooms, icons, faded photographs, and letters into crates, as if preparing to save entire generations through a single escape. But the Red Army overwhelms the peninsula. One breakthrough becomes two. Two become a rout. Wrangel orders a mass evacuation, ships loading so many people that decks creak under the weight. Thousands escape across the Black Sea to refugee communities in Constantinople, Serbia, France, and beyond. Thousands more are left behind. And when the Reds flood into Crimea, the reprisals are swift and brutal. Executions in ports, arrests in villages, purges of officers, landowners, intellectuals, anyone suspected of having supported the white cause. You walk through a Crimean street the day after the final town falls and feel the dread clinging to doorframes, pooling in alleyways like cold fog. Residents whisper that the sea itself seems darker now. With Wrangel gone, the whites are finished. But the war isn't neatly over. From Tambov to Siberia, the Green armies still bite at red supply lines. Makhno's forces, battered but still stubborn, launch raids before slipping into the countryside like ghosts. In central Russia, peasant uprisings spark again and again, fueled by famine and fury over grain requisitions. The Red Army responds ruthlessly, surrounding villages, burning encampments, using poison gas in forests where rebels hide. The mop-up operations grind across the land for months. You hear gunfire echo across marshland at dawn. You pass Red detachments dragging prisoners toward makeshift jails. You see mothers clutching their children as entire villages are searched house by house. It's victory, but a victory soaked in grief. And yet, slowly, painfully, the fires die down. The Reds crush the last major uprisings. The peasants, exhausted, bury their weapons. Makhno flees into exile. The Japanese finally withdraw by 1922. The Czechoslovak Legion ships home. And as you stand on a quiet road, watching snow settle over an abandoned trench, you realize something strange. Silence feels unfamiliar now. The war is ending, not with a triumphant shout, but with a long, uneven sigh across a land that has nothing left to give. You walk into late 1920 and early 1921 with the feeling that Russia has finally stopped sprinting and instead collapses into a slow, stumbling march, bloody boots dragging through mud, rifles carried more from habit than hope. The great fronts have fallen quiet one by one. The whites are broken or gone. The greens smolder out. Makhno flees. Foreign troops board ships homeward. The war has not ended neatly, but it has ended realistically. Exhaustion wrestling down ideology, hunger overwhelming ambition, and a shattered country ready, at last, to stop tearing itself apart. And so you find yourself moving through towns that look like survivors of a natural disaster. Walls pocked with bullet marks, windows replaced with planks, chimneys leaning at odd angles, but people cautiously returning to routines. Bakers fire up stoves with the first good flour they've had in months. Teachers reopen schools in rooms where half the desks are missing. Farmers plow fields that have seen more footprints of soldiers than hooves of horses. It's fragile, but it's something. A mainstream historical fact settles over this moment like a heavy frost. By late 1920, the Bolsheviks hold military control over nearly all the former Russian Empire, with only scraps of resistance remaining. Isolated insurgents, bandits, starving detachments too weak to organize. But political victory does not immediately create stability. You sense that clearly as you move along roads lined with refugees, beggars, and families searching for relatives lost in the explosion of armies that once stomped across these regions. Into this post-war landscape walks the new economic policy, the NEP, Lenin's attempt to ease the tension gripping the countryside.
Grain requisitioning ends, replaced by taxes. Small trade reopens. Street markets blossom like wildflowers after rain. You wander through one such market in a muddy town outside Kazan, hearing vendors shouting prices, children chasing each other between stalls, and musicians playing out-of-tune balalaikas. The mood feels cautiously brighter, but you can sense the wounds beneath the laughter. Finned families, missing sons, shell-shocked veterans staring blankly at the sky. Historians still argue whether the NEP was a temporary retreat or Lenin's recognition that pure war communism couldn't sustain the new state. But as you see peasants smiling faintly as they sell surplus grain for the first time in years, you understand why the policy mattered. Without it, the embers of civil war might have reignited. Still, even as life returns, the scars of conflict remain fresh. In parts of Tambov, rumors of chemical attacks linger. In Ukraine, abandoned trenches zigzag across farmland like the ghosts of old wounds. In Siberia, railway stations still carry the smell of burnt coal and whispered memories of legionnaires and white officers. Everywhere, whispers of the past linger in corners like dust. Yet, despite the trauma, the Bolsheviks keep consolidating. They reorganize administrative regions, expand the Cheka, rebranded now as the GPU, but the fear remains the same. Rebuild industry, repair rail lines, and above all, they establish one truth with quiet, relentless determination. There will be no rival power in the new Russia. You see this truth harden in 1922, when local rebellions flicker out for the last time. When Makhno, hunted relentlessly, flees to Romania. When Japanese forces finally withdraw from Sakhalin and Vladivostok after long negotiations and mounting diplomatic pressure. When the last foreign soldiers leave Russian soil, leaving behind only bitter memories and contested graves. All these fragments form a path that leads you to a cold December morning, one where the air hangs still, snow falls softly, and delegates gather in a formal hall illuminated by tall, flickering lamps. Papers shuffle, pens scratch, and you witness the creation of something that feels larger than any of the individuals signing the documents. On December 30th, 1922, a new nation is proclaimed, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. A quirky tidbit circulates among the clerks recording the event. Someone claims the ink froze in one delegate's pen because of the building's broken windows, and another had to warm his fingers over a candle to sign properly. Whether true or embellished, the image fits the atmosphere. Grand historical transformation conducted in drafty rooms held together with determination more than comfort. You watch delegations from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Transcaucasian republics finalize the union. Some faces glow with revolutionary zeal, others look tired enough to fall asleep on the table. But all share a quiet understanding. After years of chaos, a state is taking shape. Not the empire of old, not the chaotic republic of 1917, but something entirely new. Historians still argue whether the USSR's birth represented liberation, consolidation, or the seeds of future authoritarianism. That debate will continue for generations. But standing there, watching the signatures dry, you feel a different truth, not ideological, but human. People need something solid to stand on after the ground shakes for so long. The USSR becomes that platform, steady, powerful, and, for better or worse, unyielding. Outside, snow drifts across the streets of Moscow. Children play near the Kremlin walls, making clumsy snowmen. Workers walk home carrying bread wrapped in paper scraps. Soldiers lean on railings, smoking cheap cigarettes, their uniforms patched but warm. Life goes on, not triumphantly, but stubbornly. The Civil War has ended, but its echoes cling to the land like frost that will not melt. And as you move through the quiet streets, hearing the muffled sound of boots crunching snow, you understand the weight of what Russia has become. The cost paid, the futures reshaped, the history rewritten, not in ink alone, but in hunger, fear, grit, and the resilience of millions who endured one of the darkest storms their country would ever see. And now, as the last chapter of tonight's journey settles in your mind, let the pace slow a little. Let the sounds of marching boots, rattling trains, and distant artillery fade into something softer, like snow drifting across a quiet field. You've walked through a world torn apart and stitched back together, felt the weight of decisions made in dim rooms, and heard the whispers of people trying to survive in a land that changed shape beneath their feet. So breathe out gently and imagine standing on a calm winter road at dusk. The wind isn't sharp anymore. It glides, carrying only the faintest scent of burning wood from a distant chimney. The sky stretches wide and pale, blurring from gray to lavender as evening leans in. You hear footsteps somewhere behind you, but they're unhurried, peaceful, the kind that belong to someone heading home after a long day. Picture those old battlefields now covered in blankets of quiet snow, smoothing over scars and softening the hard edges of memory. Imagine the empty trenches filled with silence instead of struggle. The frozen rivers holding only the reflection of stars instead of the weight of soldiers crossing under fire. History remains, but its noise dims, its urgency softens, and what's left is stillness. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow. Feel the warmth of your blankets, the gentle hum of your fan, the softness of the room around you. You're safe. You're here. And you've earned the rest that comes after a long journey through time. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the calm settle in like snowflakes landing one by one. Sleep well tonight, and let peace find you easily.